don't you just hate that moment when you realize that you've just been talking for 10 minutes and had never pushed the record button? So I'm going to feel like I am doing this video twice because I have just been talking about the books without pushing record. But hi guys, it's Kelly, and I want to talk to you about my most recent reads. And this time I have actually pushed the record button so you can hear it. And I'm going to do these in order of the one I like the least to the one I like the best. The first one is an audiobook I listened to. It's called Don't Even Think About It by Sarah Mlynowski. I actually finished this book about 3 weeks ago, but I just forgot to review it in my last 2 recent reads video, which should probably say something about the book. I had picked up this book because I had been reading a lot of really intense fantasy books and just needed a contemporary break. But at that time I was looking on my shelves and there was nothing just kind of light and fluffy contemporary I wanted to pick up. Hence, if you've seen my book haul for April, I ended up buying a bunch of those kind of fluffy contemporary books. But at the moment I couldn't find any. I went on my library apps and a lot of the ones I really wanted to read were not available at the time. And so I just randomly picked this book to listen to. I wanted something short enough that I could finish it in like one evening and just something that wouldn't like test my brain too much. And so that's why I picked this. And it served that purpose, but I wouldn't call it an excellent book. I gave it 3 stars. It's about a group of high school students that are in the same homeroom, and the school has decided that everybody can get free flu shots through the school, and so they go by homeroom to get them. And this batch of flu shots that this group got somehow was tainted in some way, and they all suddenly, after the flu shot, can hear each other's thoughts and hear other people's thoughts. So it's them dealing with what happens when they suddenly have the ability to hear people thinking. And even though it has that like slight fantastical element in it, it really does just feel like a high school drama, because when you can hear other people's thoughts, it amplifies like what's happening in your friendships, what's happening in your relationships. And that's really the focus of the book, is not necessarily on the fantastical element, but how the people are dealing with how that affects their lives. And I wouldn't say it's like a bad book, but I wouldn't say it's that exciting, because other than that premise, I don't really remember any of the characters or anything that really happened, and I just read it a few weeks ago. So I wouldn't say it's memorable at all, but it did serve the purpose. Like I said, there's a random dog on my porch that I've never seen before. Okay, well, I'm assuming he lives in the neighborhood. But anyways, so I wouldn't say necessarily I would go out and recommend it, but if you already own it, it was entertaining for the evening that I listened to it. Now moving on, the next book I listened to was Binti Home by Nnedi Okorafor. This is the second book in the Binti trilogy, and this is a trilogy of novellas that are like futuristic sci-fi. And I really enjoyed the first one in the series, gave it a 4 stars. This one I didn't enjoy as much, so I gave it 3.5 stars, but I still think that the character of Binti is really excellent. I listened to these while reading them in physical form because she creates this like world that is so rich. There's a lot of like words that I don't fully like understand or can't picture them in my mind while the narrator's saying them, so I like to be able to like see those words on the page. So I found I've had a rich experience being able to listen to them while reading, and I really like the audiobooks, so I continue to listen to them because they're narrated by Robin Miles, and I think she does an excellent job about making Binti this character that I really am rooting for and really loving, and so that's why I continue to listen to them. I would recommend them because I think she does an excellent job narrating. And the reason I didn't like this one as much is that it very much felt like a middle book. I still love the character of Binti, and I enjoy in this one how she deals with different issues than in the first one. It's like her character is really developing. I don't want to say specifically necessarily because I don't want to spoil, but one of the things that I think is kind of general, because it is called Binti Home, is she's dealing with how she has changed over the course of like the first book and the year that's passed in between the first and the second. That way she has changed and way she sees her future going, and then how the people in home that she comes from, her culture and her family, how they expect her future to be and how they envision her, and how that is not necessarily lining up. And so I really like that dynamic. It's interesting to see kind of people dealing with those family expectations and how you approach that, because you want to stay connected to your family but still be able to go out on your own. And so Binti is dealing with that a lot in this book. So I still enjoy the character and I'm excited to continue, but it just felt very middle book because it didn't have as much stuff really happening. It is mostly internal, kind of Binti working through things. I also don't like, when you read novellas, I have a problem when they're like part of a series and yet they feel like they could have just been all put together in one book. The first one I did not feel was like that because it had a satisfying conclusion. I felt like I could read this book and not need to pick up the second book immediately, that I could feel satisfied and take my time to get to the second one. This one did not feel like a complete story. This one ended in a way that I'm like, okay, this is just part of the next book. Really, the second and third book to me feel like they should have been put together. And that bothers me when the book is so short. I'm like, why did this have to be its own published book? Because it did not have an ending. It just felt like part of a story. And I'm assuming that will continue in the third book. And so that just bothers me because it just feels like you're trying to get more money out of publishing. I don't know if that's the author, if that's the publisher, but I didn't feel that way in the first one. I did feel that was complete, but this does not feel like a complete book. That's just my opinion. So I just couldn't feel like I could rate it super high because it doesn't feel complete. So it was 3.5. I still love the character and would like to continue the books. And then the next one is Wishtree by Katherine Applegate. This is a children's book. I mean, definitely like lower elementary. Like you can tell it's got pictures and really big writing. This one you could probably read as an adult. You could read it in like an hour, hour and a half, because it is a quick story. I had read The One and Only Ivan by Katherine Applegate in March and really loved it, like my new favorite children's book, so I wanted to read more by her, and so I picked this one up. And this is a book that is narrated by a tree. So the wish tree is actually the main character of the book. She's narrating it, talking about her history as a tree, why people put wishes on her, because she's called a wish tree because people like tie wishes once a year on like May Day. Everybody ties a wish onto her branches and, you know, hopes it will come true. And this book also involves all the animals that live inside the tree. So we're meeting like raccoons and opossums, and there's a crow and like all those, and they all like talk and interact with the tree. And then there are like 2 like children that come into the story a little ways in. And I thought this was a really sweet book. I did not love it the way I love The One and Only Ivan. Like I probably wouldn't like read this book over and over again with my children like I would that one. But it does have a good message. I just think it didn't have quite the impact. Maybe because it's from a tree, and I don't know, because One and Only Ivan was from the perspective of the gorilla, but I really connected with the gorilla and with his struggles, where this one, maybe because it's I don't know if you just can't connect with the tree as much, or if it was just the story wasn't as impactful. I still liked it, like I said, 4 stars, but I wouldn't say it was as excellent as The One and Only Ivan, which I guess I shouldn't compare. But still, I was a little disappointed because I really wanted to connect. And I did cry at the end, so that's I think why I gave it 4 stars, because I did find it really sweet at the end. I just didn't feel like I connected with the characters throughout. It wasn't until the end that I really felt emotion. And then the next one is The Woman Who Rides Like a Man by Tamora Pierce. This is the 3rd book in the Alana series, or the Song of the Lioness series, but that stars Alana. And I gave this one 4 stars. The first Alana book gave 4 stars. The second one was 5 stars, and this one was 4. So I still think this series is really solid. This one is, I would say, in the YA realm. Like, so it starts the series in middle grade, but then definitely moves to YA, because this one has definitely some stories about, or like some storyline that involves sex and marriage. So I definitely would say that these are teen now instead of middle grade. I did really enjoy this. I'm continuing to love Alana and the way she interacts with the people in her life. This one, the reason I didn't give it 5 stars was that for the first half, it just felt pretty flat because we were staying in one place. And I'd gotten so used to the really high action and adventure stuff that were happening in the first 2 that it felt very like calm and more of a quiet story, and that wasn't really what I wanted from Alana. So the first half kind of, just kind of meander along. But then the second half I really loved, and I enjoyed the way that Tamora Pierce approaches romance in this book. And I don't want to give away spoilers since it is the third in the series, but I just feel like a lot of teen fantasy books have this thing where, you know, like girls, a lot of times in the fantasy book, women can marry young, so you see these like, you know, 18, 19-year-olds that are like meeting the love of their lives and like basically jumping into getting engaged or into a committed relationship and all that. And the way that Alana approaches that is so logical, and I love it. And I know that sounds like, oh, that's not very romantic, but I really appreciate that. As someone that I, as a teenager, kept telling everybody, I'm not getting married until I'm 27, 28. Like, I want to really be sure. I want to, like, live my life first to make sure I know what I want and who I'm, the person I'm going to marry. And I really appreciate seeing that in somebody in a book. So I would highly recommend this series and think that the way they approach sex and relationships is great. So I enjoyed that quite a bit, and I'm excited to finish off the series. And the last book I read was Matilda by Roald Dahl. I actually ended up listening to this because Summer from Summer Dawn, I'll link her down below, she had said she had just listened to this recently and that the audiobook was amazing. So I have been reading a lot of Roald Dahl books lately and thought I would give this audiobook a try. It is narrated by Kate Winslet, and it is amazing. Like, I know she's an actress, and I expect like actresses and actors to do a good job in an audiobook, but she was excellent. And I don't even know that I would have guessed it was Kate Winslet if I didn't know, because the voices she creates for each of the characters are so original and are so different than her normal voice that I was just immersed in this world and these characters, and I loved it. I loved like every moment of this. 5 stars. And so I would highly recommend the audiobook. Even if you have already read this book, I think the audiobook is worth it. It's probably less than 4 hours, so it's not a long one. I would say for parents that this is not a book for like really young children. Like, I would not have listened to this with my 4-year-old because there's a lot of child abuse in this. If you haven't read Matilda, it's about a little girl. She starts off the book being 4, and I think by the time she's in school, she's probably around 6. And she's just really precocious, is smart, like knows a lot about math and reading and everything as that really young child. And just her experience with her family, and then her experience in her first year of school with a really horrible headmistress that treats her badly. And when I say child abuse, like her family is very mentally and emotionally abusive to her, and then when she gets to school, the headmistress is really like physically abusive to the children. And so I just think for really young children that wouldn't be good, because they wouldn't be able to separate that we're just like kind of hearing about good people versus bad people. So I just would hold off to be more like an elementary age. So I wouldn't say this is a preschool book to listen to. But as an adult, I loved it, and when my kids get old enough to be able to handle that and understand kind of what villains are, then I would listen to this with them, because the audiobook is so good. And that's it. Those are the 5 books I have read recently. If you've read any of these, I would love to talk about them more, and I'll see you next time. Bye.